Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. Welcome to my team selection ahead of Double Gameweek 7. Hey everyone and welcome to my team selection ahead of Game Week 7. Let's start off with looking at my Game Week 6 performance. And in a normal week, I'd probably be pretty happy with the performance overall. 74 points with the hit comes out at 70 net. Usually that'd be a pretty good score, but again, the bar was really high this week with a lot of midfielders, especially ones that I didn't own, popping off this week. It was especially frustrating watching Maddison, who I just sold, and Son go off in the London derby as well. So that was a bit annoying. Overall, though, I'm not too displeased with my side going into Game Week 7. Onana in goal with 7 points was a bit of a pleasant surprise. I wasn't actually expecting a clean sheet from him against Burnley, even though Burnley haven't looked fantastic. Man United had been leaking goals. So 7 points from him was a welcome surprise. Even more welcome and a bit of a saviour to my game week was Trippier, who came in clutch right at the end on the Sunday with 18 points. Hat-trick of assists, clean sheet and 3 bonus. It couldn't really have gone much better there. A doggy with 0 points, not ideal. And a Stupinian getting the assist without the clean sheet, still got the bonus point. So that's just one to note down, that he's still getting those bonus points even though he's not getting the clean sheets at the moment, which could be quite a feather in his cap. In midfield, Rashford was my vice captain but didn't really do much against Burnley, 3 points. Foden getting maximum bonus and a goal was a pleasant surprise, 11 points from him. Saka as well, I think we know what to expect from him now. Goal and an assist. That assist was also a deflected shot as well, so it could have been 2 goals, but we'll definitely take the goal and assist from him. Mbuemo, very disappointing, even finished the game at right wing back as well. So I don't think that'll be the same case moving forward, but a little bit frustrated with the move there. I probably regret moving Maddison out, but it looks like he could be injured this week, so maybe I've gotten a little bit lucky there. Sterling with 2 points, flattered to deceive yet again. Very frustrating, but I'm probably going to hold on to him for the next 2 game weeks. Up front, Haaland with a goal, getting 6 points, doubled to 12, and Alvarez getting taken off on the 57th minute, I think it was. Mainly because of that Rodri red card, so I don't think I'm too worried about that. What I'm a little bit more concerned about is the fact that he played a good 80 odd minutes last night in the Cup, so maybe that's a little bit of a concern for the weekend. Although he feels so important to the way City are playing at the moment, I still expect him to start. On the bench, Kabore with 5 points got the jammy assist from the penalty. Outside of that, not really much to shout about. Turner with 1 point proves that the goalkeeping decision was correct, and Saliba getting 1 point as well. I wasn't ever going to start him either in that North London derby. Overall, 74 points, -4, a red arrow again down to 1.6, 1.7 million. It's not nightmare territory, but I am getting frustrated with the lack of progress in recent weeks. So let's find out how I'm going to try and get a green arrow going into Double Game Week 7. So starting off with the goalkeeper and defence, Crystal Palace at home for Man United is a pretty decent fixture, and I do fancy Onana to get a couple of saves and maybe even the clean sheet there as well. I do prefer that over Brentford at home for Turner. I think Brentford probably score in that fixture, even though Nottingham Forest have looked decent at home. I think Onana is probably the play this week. In defence, Burnley at home for Trippier, no questions there. No mention of an injury, and he was left out of the midweek clash against Man City, so I do expect him to play and probably get the full 90 at home to Burnley. Kabore comes into my starting 11. Everton and Burnley in that double game week I think is too good to ignore, even for a player, well, not a player, but a team of that quality. I still think that there's a chance that they could keep a clean sheet in one of those games, and maybe even Kabore gets an assist in one of the 2 as well. His underlying attacking data is actually not looking too bad. He's actually one of the top defenders in terms of the underlying XA so far this season, so I actually don't mind starting him, especially with that double. Estupinian filling out the 3 at the back. Aston Villa away is not an easy fixture. I do expect them to score against Brighton, but again, as we saw last game week, Estupinian can be trusted for regular attacking returns, so I do fancy him to get something against Villa as well. The only slight concern there, I guess, is whether or not he actually starts the game, but I do expect him to. Even though Lamptey can play there now, as we've seen, I do still expect Estupinian to be starting in in that pretty important clash against Aston Villa away from home. On the bench, Saliba, Bournemouth away is a decent fixture. Pretty happy if he has to come into the side if I get a last-minute injury concern, especially in that back three. So I wouldn't say that it's a massive competition between starting him or Estupiñán, but I could be persuaded into starting Saliba over him. I just think the attacking returns are right there for Estupiñán, whereas with Saliba, you're pretty much banking on the clean sheet. And away from home, I'm not sure Arsenal have as much reliability for those clean sheets. Against Bournemouth isn't a bad game at all, but I still kind of think that Bournemouth score at home, so I'd rather trust Estupiñán away at Aston Villa for the attacking returns. Moving on to the midfield, and I'm going with 5 across the middle yet again. I'm pretty happy with this 5 as well, I've got to say. Even though Rashford didn't perform too well against Burnley away from home, I still back him to do decently at home in any given game week against any opposition. He usually gets a pretty good return at home, and Crystal Palace represent a good defence, but also a team that I expect Man United to score goals against. So fingers crossed on Rashford, won't be selling him this week. Foden away from home at Wolves. I think Wolves is a good fixture to be targeting at the moment. And Foden did get a pretty decent rest in midweek, so I expect him to start against Wolves. I think he came on around the 80th minute. I think he was actually substituted on for Alvarez as well. So I do expect him to get decent minutes, and he seems so important to the way that Man City play at the moment, and he seems to be in very good form too. So no worries there at all on Phil Foden. Moving across to Saka, Bournemouth away from home, in theory, is a fantastic fixture for him. But we do have that slight doubt over an injury concern. Arteta brought it up in the pre-match press conference for the Carabao Cup. It looks like he hasn't trained so far this week, so do keep an eye out on whether you see him in any training pictures, or if Arteta comes out and says that he will be in the squad for that Bournemouth game. I think it's fair to say that you probably want to have a plan for Saka, and I certainly will, because those midfield spots, especially around 8.5 to 9 million, are so valuable this season, and there's plenty of upside to be chasing. I think if you've got an injured Saka that drops down to the bench, I personally wouldn't be too happy having Saliba with only really the chance for that clean sheet subbing on for Saka, who I expect to be much more explosive, and I think the other options in midfield have a much higher upside than bringing on Saliba rather than Saka. So if he is crocked for this weekend, especially with Man City coming up next week, I think I might take a chance on getting rid of him, especially because I'm wildcarding in game week 9 or game week 10. I can just bring him back in after that. So stay tuned for what I'm going to be potentially doing with Saka if he is injured this game week. Moving on, Mbeumo was frustrating against Everton at home. Brentford in general just didn't play that well at all. I think it was a bit of an off day for them. Thomas Frank came out and admitted as much after the match as well. So fingers crossed they get back to winning ways away at Nottingham Forest. Not an easy game away from home, but Mbeumo still on penalties, still good underlying data, so I'm going to back him for this week. Sterling is a real puzzle at the moment, and he's only returned in one game so far this season, and that was against Luton, where he got that 19-point haul. I think it's fair to say with Sterling that time is running out, but again, because I'm wildcarding in a couple of weeks' time, and the fixtures for the next 2 for Chelsea are still looking really good, I think I'm still going to continue backing him with the fixtures ahead. And the underlying data in the last game week didn't actually look too good. But beyond that, his underlying data has looked pretty good. If you actually use the eye test for the game against Aston Villa, I wasn't expecting this, but he did actually have a lot of chances, and he also had that assist ruled out for offside. So a lot of those things won't show up on the underlying data because they were actually all ruled offside. Now, he had a one-on-one, which he did miss. It was saved well by the keeper, but that would also really benefit the underlying data, and the assist as well. Disasi in front of goal, I'd expect that to be a relatively high XA chance too. That was also ruled out for being offside, and both of those were actually fairly marginal as well. So in another day, on another game week, he could have actually gotten a couple of returns there. So even though the data doesn't suggest that he performed too well last game week, I think it was actually a bit unlucky, and previous to that, the underlying data still look pretty good. I might be trying to write a narrative here and trying to force a story where Sterling isn't a must sell at the moment, because at the end of the day, Chelsea just aren't performing that well. But the underlying data, both for Sterling and for Chelsea, is still pretty strong. In fact, they've won all of their games in terms of the underlying XG against their opponents so far this season, which again is probably just writing a bit of a narrative. I'm sure that there are a lot of you out there that will just look at that and think that that's not really a relevant statistic. But I think that shows to me that the returns are going to come eventually. We just have to hope for a reversion to the mean. Time is running out. I'll be wildcarding him out of my side in game week 9 no matter what. There's no way he's going to be staying after these next 2 fixtures. But I think there are other fires in my side that I need to put out more quickly. And I think because of the fixtures, I'm just going to take a chance on holding him for the next 2 and hope that they finally start returning goals. So up top at the moment, I've got the double City attack, making it a triple overall with Foden in midfield as well. The armband as it stands is on Erling Haaland. Now, he doesn't have that double game week fixture, which Luton and Burnley have. But I still think Wolves away from home is a pretty decent fixture for Haaland to be targeting. And again, he was rested in the cup in midweek, so I expect him to get good minutes against Wolves away from home. Alvarez was frustrating at the weekend, but I think it's fair to say he was fairly unlucky, and owners and new buyers were also hard done by. I don't think there's any chance he would have come off on the 57th minute if it wasn't for that Rodri red card. And I think also Man City were playing much more conservatively after that as well. Without that red card, it would have been really interesting to see how long Alvarez would have stayed on the pitch and whether Man City would have kept forcing the issue, kept trying to attack and kept going for goal. I think when Rodri went off, they had to play much more conservatively. Obviously, they had to make a sub to make themselves a little bit more solid at the back, didn't leave them so exposed. And obviously that came at the price of a Julian Alvarez. Now, hopefully, because he's been so important to the way Man City have been playing this season, he'll come back into the side against Wolves away from home, despite the fact he did get good minutes in the cup in midweek. Now, I personally think that that's not too much to worry about. Pep pretty much had a choice whether to start Alvarez or Haaland, and he had to rest one of them. So I think overall you'd want to rest Haaland because of his previous injury record in seasons gone by at Dortmund and the fact that he's so important to the way Man City play. I think out of the 2, Haaland's probably the one that needed to get the rest more, so Alvarez had to play those minutes. Now, that's not to say I don't think it's a slight risk having Alvarez this week. I think there's maybe a 10% chance he gets rested, but overall, I still don't think that he's a sell at the moment. I think the only thing that would tempt people is the fact that there is a double game week player waiting in the wings that could even be a captaincy option this week, cheaper than Alvarez, that you could get to probably even without a hit this week if you don't have concerns elsewhere. So as I just mentioned, the way to move in a double game week player this week would probably be moving out Alvarez at 6.9 million for Carlton Morris at 5.5. It's a move that I have considered, and there are circumstances in which I would be making this move. But because I'm looking at making 2 moves next week and I ideally want to roll the transfer this week, I think that Alvarez is a strong enough hold and a player with enough upside that, to be honest, even with the double game week for Morris, I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if Alvarez outscored him. I think it's more likely that Morris does better, but because I would be locking in for a -4 next week if I made a transfer this week, I'm not sure Morris outscores Alvarez by 4 points. And because I wouldn't be captaining Morris, I still think Haaland's probably the way to go for me personally. It means that those 4 points would have to pay off in a straight heads-up situation between Alvarez and Morris this game week. And I'm just not that convinced that Morris outscores him by 4. If he gets 1 attacking return this game week, that would probably be about what I'm expecting from Morris. And that would probably leave him on around 9 or 10 points across the game week, if not maybe 11 or 12. Alvarez, in my mind, could easily get to 8, 9, or even getting that double-digit haul against Wolves away from home. And as long as I know that he's starting or don't hear that he's not starting, I think I'm fairly comfortable holding him. Now, there is another move that I'm really considering looking at this week that wouldn't break apart my side for next week. So let's move on to that now, because I'm taking that one a little bit more seriously. So the final move that I'm looking at this game week all does revolve around Bukayo Saka and whether or not he's going to be injured this game week. Arteta, as I mentioned earlier on in this video, has hinted that Saka hasn't been training this week at all. And if he still hasn't been training by the time that I need to make my transfers, or we hear that he's definitely ruled out of the Bournemouth game, this actually becomes a really easy move to make. I want Son Heung-min next week anyway against Luton, and against Liverpool at home. On paper, it's not an ideal fixture, but I actually still really fancy Son for that game against Liverpool. I think their high line, again, I keep harping on about Liverpool's high line, but I still think that it's something that can be exploited by a pacey attacker, and a player like Son with finishing as good as his and that pace that he's got in behind could be ideally suited for that fixture. And I wouldn't be making this transfer if Saka wasn't injured, but because I want to make it next week anyway, I might just be making it this week if Saka is ruled out. Try and chase that upside against Liverpool at home. And also it means that I wouldn't need to take that hit next week, even though I've made a transfer this week, because he's one of the two transfers I would have made next week anyway. So overall, I don't mind this move whatsoever, but a lot hinges on whether or not Bukayo Saka is ruled out, or if we hear nothing about him training in the week. So overall, I'm just going to wait for more team news. Hopefully we hear something on Saka, and then I can make a move either way. And maybe I'll just roll the transfer this week if he's fit. But I think Son is a fairly good option to bring in. I've got the money and I want to make it next week anyway. So if Saka's ruled out, Son will probably be the guy that comes in. So there you have it. That's my team selection for Double Game Week 7. It looks like I'm only going to be going with one Double Game Week player in the form of Issa Kabore, which could be a little bit of a risk. So do let me know in the comments below whether or not you're going to dive headfirst into the Double Game Week, and whether or not you're going to put the armband on Carlton Morris as well. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. But I wish you all the best ahead of Double Game Week 7. Hopefully anyone watching this gets a green arrow this game week, and I'll see you next week as we start previewing Game Week 8.